everybody, welcome back to Love Enthroned. I came back with your favorite Esther, and today we have amazing content for you. So today we'll be talking about, setting boundaries in relationships. Yes, and that's very important. We're comparing it with the Bible and then also bringing it into real life situations. But before we go into that, you know what to do. Subscribe, like, share, and do leave a comment. Okay guys, so in the book of Leviticus, we see how God, Holy God, tried to be in a mutual relationship with his people, sinful people. And, because of how they were at both extremes, it was difficult to be in a wonderful relationship. And so God, being such a loving God, had to come up with a bunch of rules to see how can I be in a relationship with my people. And that's why we have don't do this, don't do that. If you do this, you sacrifice animals. If you kill, you do. And there are some laws that if they break, they would be dismissed from the community. They would, Bible says that they will no longer be regarded as his people. And there are some laws that, okay, if they break it, it just has to do with restitution. You restitute, you do this, you do that, you pay back tenfold, And we see all of these things. So for me, it's a wonderful picture of how relationships work. Sometimes you have to compromise, and then at times you have to take a stand on certain things. So at what point in a relationship do you draw the line and say, okay, I am not compromising on this thing, and I can compromise on certain things.
Okay, thank you very much, Unini, for having me on this episode.
In
the introduction, you mentioned two things that are very important. One is compromise, one is boundaries, and these are two very important things within the context of a relationship. So let's consider the first word, boundaries. I just want to quickly read out the definition of the word boundary. So this says it is a real or imagined line that marks the limits or edges of something and separates it from other things or a place. Basically a dividing line. And most times when we think of the word boundary, the first thing that comes to our mind is something negative, something that limits you. But what if it's limiting you from something else? That's how most times you don't see it. And the idea of boundaries is within that context, you are free to express yourself, meaning there is some freedom in the boundary. So the boundary is not restricting you. It's allowing you to exercise your freedom within a protected context. And that is how we see it in the lens of God's eye. We see the creation story from Genesis chapter 1, how God makes the heavens, makes the earth, makes plants, makes a very beautiful garden. A garden that literally services itself, and then creates man and woman, brings them into a garden that has such beautiful fruits, and tells them you can eat of everything in the garden.
So meaning that boundary has actually even been from the very beginning.
From the very beginning, and it was there protectively. It was the wisdom of God, right? And like a sound preacher I know once said, boundaries are always for protection. When we see that God is marking a line, we should never see it as, oh, he's trying to restrict me. We should think, okay, maybe this is actually for my protection. And you see, whether or not we accept, maybe Eve did not know the consequences, so therefore, she gave into the temptation. The truth is, if you trust a person, you would also trust when it looks like they're saying, don't do this, right? You'd believe if this person if I could wake up one morning into a garden with animals that I named, with rivers and gold and silver, if this person could give me such a lavish life, he must have a reason for telling me not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So boundaries are essential for protection. Now, compromise. Why is compromise important? Compromise is important because we're not all the same people. And so there is a place for meeting each other halfway, for the want of a better word. We must be willing to say, you know what, on this subject, I agree or admit time is going. Sorry.
Don't worry, you can just continue.
So we agree that, we don't all see things from the same point of view, but we're willing, to learn from each other. However, before you get to the point of compromise, you must understand that there's some things that you cannot compromise on.
So
And
really
there's
you have to have your own standard.
Exactly.
Their standard.
Exactly. And there's some things you can compromise on. On those things you can't compromise on, that's where you put a boundary. That will even inform whether or not you go ahead with the person or not. So that boundary is understood even before you people proceed to the relationship. And then other things that are not necessarily as essential as those things, you can always compromise.
Okay. So one amazing thing about relationship is that, like a true love relationship, is that whoever you're in a relationship with or you love will be somebody that respects your standard and your boundaries. So they're not trying to make you leave that space that you've created for yourself. Rather, they respect you for it, and they love you for that as well. Yeah. So which brings us back to what we discussed last week, that if you are in a relationship with someone and then it's bringing out a part of you that is not you, then that's just a pointer to you that okay, this is not it. It's not it. So number one, standards are super important. That's why I listened to a message by Pastor Todd, and he was talking about how you have to enjoy your single days before you get into a relationship, because it's during your single time that you create those standards that allow you know how you should be in a relationship, who you should even be in a relationship with, and that will just make it easier to understand compromises, boundaries, and all of it.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright guys, what do you think about standards and boundaries? So please leave your opinion in the comment section, and then we'll really love to hear what you have to say about this. Thank you so much. Remember that love enthroned is God enthroned, and see you next week.